Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and you're listening to The Business of Content, a podcast about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. In today's episode, we're talking about the state of Wikipedia in 2020. Back in 2010, the world was still skeptical of Wikipedia. High school teachers and college professors warned students to never, ever use it for research. If you ever tried to cite it in an argument, your opponent would mock it as unreliable. Late-night hosts like Stephen Colbert would enlist their audiences to flood a specific Wikipedia page and vandalize it. Celebrities and major companies would treat it as a vanity project, editing their own pages while making absolutely no effort to disclose their conflict of interest. Flash forward to 2020, and Wikipedia certainly has more respect. The Wikimedia Foundation, which acts as its official steward, has tens of millions of dollars in the bank. While college professors don't view it as a primary source for research, they'll sometimes endorse it as a starting point for said research. And nearly everyone recognizes it as one of the most influential websites on the internet. But though tens of millions of people use Wikipedia every day, most only have a passing understanding of how a core group of a few thousand volunteer editors perform the vast majority of contributions to its articles. One of those editors is Bill Beutler. For the past decade, Bill has consulted with hundreds of brands, helping them to edit their Wikipedia pages without running afoul of the platform's strict rules. I recently interviewed Bill about the problems that have plagued Wikipedia for the past decade and the issues its community will need to address in the decade to come. Let's jump right into it. Hey, Bill, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Simon. Thanks for having me here.
So I brought you on to talk about Wikipedia. Can you first talk a little bit about your expertise and background with Wikipedia? You're one of the few people I've ever met who actually draws part of your living, relating to something with Wikipedia.
That's right. I mean, there are not a great number of us who do. Will sometimes I'll meet somebody who, hears that my work involves Wikipedia, and they will immediately think that I work for Wikipedia. And then there's often an assumption that, these editors, they must work for Wikipedia too. And neither of those things is actually the case. So my background, I've been, editing Wikipedia as a volunteer on my own, of my own interest, since 2006. And while I started editing Wikipedia, I also happened to be working for a DC area digital public affairs firm. And, my employer had clients that were the subject of Wikipedia pages, and I started figuring out how could I help the clients on Wikipedia, while also respecting, Wikipedia's mission and rules. And it was a really intriguing puzzle that I think I've never completely solved it, but it's come a long way since the late aughts. I did have some success working for clients on Wikipedia projects, and then in 2010, I decided that there was more success to be had if I was to leave and try to build my own thing, and so I did. The company that I lead now, Beutler Inc., does a lot more than just Wikipedia, but it continues to be perhaps our most interesting service, and one that almost no one else does quite what we do. We do help. We help brands. We help organizations. We help individuals. Really collaborate with the Wikipedia community. It's not quite paid editing per se, because we do not directly edit articles, but we do facilitate conversations with the Wikipedia volunteers to try to improve the coverage of information about our clients on Wikipedia. And that's I think part of what I'm here to talk about today. Or I think today you also want to talk about some bigger picture Wikipedia issues. I'm happy to talk about either.
Yeah, so actually, I interviewed you before for this podcast and about your particular work, and listeners can go back and listen to our previous episode to get a full understanding of how your business works. Very briefly, you just launched a new product that people can actually subscribe to, like a SaaS product that allows them to monitor their Wikipedia pages, right?
That is right. Thank you for mentioning, doing my plugging things so I don't have to. You were talking about WikiWatch, yes, which you can find at wikiwatch.net to learn more about. It is intended as a B2B SaaS solution where you follow Wikipedia articles, receive updates when there are changes, and our software also provides a dashboard that can give more insights about what actually happened in plain English, really designed around the needs of a brand manager or an account executive who is, watching the reputation of, of multiple subjects, be they clients, be they executives, be they, brands that, your organization is responsible for. It is brand new as of late last year. It's a big initiative for us, and we think it's really cool. It has we have lots of ideas of things we are going to build into it, but we're just getting started. So wikiwatch.net, go have a look if you think that's interesting. I'd be happy to talk about it.
Awesome. So to switch gears a little bit, you wrote a recent blog post looking at where Wikipedia stands heading into 2020. Can we first talk a little bit about, I want to spend some time just looking back over the last decade on Wikipedia, like how the perception of Wikipedia has changed over the last decade. Like, I feel like 10 years ago, we were still making jokes about how unreliable Wikipedia was. Professors were still warning their students that they shouldn't use it as a source. But you don't hear those jokes as much anymore.
Absolutely. And, this blog post that I wrote, listeners should go have a look at my, I didn't even mention, I have written a blog about Wikipedia for more than 10 years now. It's called thewikipedian.net. And for the last 10 years, actually, I have been writing this annual year-end blog post, even in years where I didn't write anything more than the annual year-end blog post. I wrote what I call the top 10 Wikipedia stories of 2019 is the one that I published just a week or so back. And you're right, there have been a lot of changes around. Like 10 years ago, Wikipedia was 10 years old. Now it is almost, it's 19 years old. It'll come up on its 20th anniversary in January of 2021. Just to pick one thing, as you did, education. I do feel like this is one of the success stories of Wikipedia's acceptance into what I like to call the global information infrastructure. That in various ways, Wikipedia really does fill this niche that no one else even comes close to doing. You're absolutely right that education was one of the most prominent holdouts to say, hey, kids, stay away from this, untrustworthy, scurrilous, vandalism-ridden hodgepodge of, random jokers on the internet posting things you can't trust. Educators like librarians really, I think, have played a large role in changing this. A number of the Wikipedia editors whom I know, who I'm friends with, are themselves professional librarians. It turns out that Wikipedia, at its more competent edges, like where you have people who are professional working around the edges of Wikipedia to, say, import data and standardize and curate. Like, a lot of great work has been done. Educators have seen that. And there's even an organization called the Wiki Education Foundation that has, over the last several years, made great strides in creating partnerships with universities and helping to teach classes, and all of which has made, teachers come to stop seeing Wikipedia as something to be feared, and oftentimes even a pedagogical tool, if I'm pronouncing that word correctly. You can edit Wikipedia to learn how to master a subject. And so more and more have been doing that.
And so, it's been almost 15 years since I've been out of college. How would a professor or teacher refer to Wikipedia now? Would they say, use it as kind of like a starting point? Obviously, probably, would they allow it to be cited in a paper, or would they say kind of use it as a guidepost to kind of guide your thinking at a surface level, but use that as kind of like a springboard for further research?
It is more the latter, for sure. Generally speaking, I would not advise anyone to cite Wikipedia. Frankly, Wikipedia editors themselves would not encourage that either. The classic formulation, as my good friend Andrew Lee puts it, Wikipedia, there is no better place to begin your research and no worse place to end it. And I think that really captures it perfectly. That the articles themselves can be helpful as giving you a basic handle on the facts, but then if you want to really understand it in a more substantial way, then follow the little citation number down to the bottom of the page, click through on the source. The concept of reliable sources is one that listeners may have heard about regarding Wikipedia. That the sources that are allowed to be used to verify information in articles tend to need to be of a relatively high quality. Granted, that is not always the case. You can find plenty of articles that are poorly cited or will, cite social media sometimes, which is actually against the rules. But really, it should be to journal articles, magazines, newspapers, occasionally government reports. But a lot of times, Wikipedia really wants a secondary source, like a journalistic source, to provide context rather than just quoting a government report, because no one's going to dispute mostly that the government report is probably accurate. Although these days, who can even say?
Yeah.
But like what is the important aspect of it? Like, Wikipedia editors don't want Wikipedia, its community, does not want individual editors deciding what they think is important out of the report. They want to lean on what did somebody from ProPublica or the New York Times or sometimes even National Review say about what is important.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of, buttress that, like, I can't tell you, as a journalist myself, how many times I start at Wikipedia, but then I click on the citations, which brings me to the bottom of the page, and then I'll go and click on that New York Times article from 2012 or whatever, and kind of read the firsthand source that it's coming from. And I'll usually, when I'm writing my article, that's the article that I'll end up citing instead of the Wikipedia article.
It's wonderful for discovery. I think it's a well-trod path now to go to the article, go to the citation, go to the actual original source. I mean, I'm somebody who, I must admit, when I was in college, I was in college before Wikipedia, or I graduated right after it had started. So I'm of like the very thin slice of a micro generation who used Britannica.com more than never used Wikipedia in college papers because I graduated right after. But I would use it the exact same way. I have to admit, it would, read the thing, go to the bottom. And I remember this being controversial among my friends and I. Like, is it okay basically to piggyback on someone else's bibliography? And I think we did it because it was convenient, but we felt awkward about it. It does seem like in this day and age, well, hell, at least you're getting reliable information. We don't care how original you were about finding it. Seems to be the case. Although, you know what? Like, there's just so damn much information out there now that's far more accessible. You would think that it should be easier to build your own bibliography, but B, I think the information overload just means that who's got the damn time? So as long as you got some reliable sources, Wikipedia is a good source of them.
Yeah, I have this complete segue, but I have this theory that LinkedIn is really the Wikipedia for non-famous people. In the sense of like, and that's why you should really like fill out the bio part that it allows you at the top, so they can get like, they can scan for your work history, but then they can also get the paragraph bio, because it really kind of serves that same function.
It does, I suppose. There's a whole phenomenon of people who would like to have a Wikipedia article, and in my day-to-day work, we have to turn away a lot of people who show up at our door ready to pay us to create a Wikipedia article, but it turns out that they don't have. And here's another term of art from Wikipedia that listeners may be familiar with. They don't have the notability. Notability is this like complicated concept at Wikipedia about, are you important enough, basically, to have a Wikipedia page? And the truth is, most people are not. Every once in a while, someone will ask me, do I have a Wikipedia page, or does my company have a Wikipedia article? No, and I'm fine with that. And I don't think we would, qualify anyway. It's a double-edged sword. If you have a page, then you have to be wary of it, which of course is why we started WikiWatch. End of advertisement.
So to turn to some of the other headlines of the last 10 years, for a few years there were lots of stories written about how Wikipedia's core editor base was shrinking. Can you first kind of explain what that storyline is? And then, I know the Wikimedia Foundation has been trying to fix it, and tell me, like, do you think it's something that, was it a real problem, and is it being fixed?
Yeah, very good question. This is definitely a trend that has changed since 10 years ago when I started writing the annual post. To tell the story properly, you have to go back to the beginning of Wikipedia and the in the pre-Cambrian era of Wikipedia editing, you had just a handful of computer nerds and disaffected scholars who use their spare time to start to build this encyclopedia project. But then around like 2005 and 2006 and really 2007, the thing just went gangbusters. It's your typical hockey stick uh, chart where things go slowly for a while and then boom, all of a sudden you have this explosion, a big bang of contributors. And I was in the early end of that since I started in June of 2006. The real like explosion was in like the middle of 2007 or just 2007 overall. And that's when Wikipedia went from being something you'd heard about to a household word. The site got much better. This is where before that point, professors were probably correct in saying stay away from Wikipedia. It's not that good. After this point, it started to get good. And so, it went to like nearly 5 million Wikipedia entries or 4.5 million after this point. And in the perception of many, a lot of the work was done. That the encyclopedia was never finished. There's actually an essay, behind the scenes essay at Wikipedia about how Wikipedia is never finished. There'll always be new things happening, reason to create new pages, but to some extent, a lot of the work, a lot of the green field had been plowed, and so now instead of exploring, pioneering, creating, well, the new work was like going back over and refining and improving and curation, like archivist, librarian type work, rather than the exciting swashbuckling, exploring. And so you did see this attrition of editors beginning around 2010, where the number of editors just started to decline, and it was actually rather swift. It was not quite as hockey. It was not like the reverse of the hockey stick, but it was precipitous, and this continued until say 2005, 2006, or sorry, 2015, 2016 or so, where there's a lot of hand wringing about where are they going. We're losing people and we're not adding them as quickly as possible. Every Wikipedia editor really has a life cycle of interest, and for most people that interest lasts for one edit. For a select few, they might make a handful of edits. I mean, the people who become dedicated Wikipedians, like myself, or those who edit even more than me, we are such a vanishingly small percentage of the people who will ever look at Wikipedia that these editors they are considered precious commodities. And so sometimes there's a fear of turning away even toxic editors who are very productive because they do good work. There are lots of mini controversies at Wikipedia about what kind of acceptable behavior will we allow, because it can be kind of a spectrumy male place to hang out where feelings like there's no crying in baseball or in Wikipedia, and people can be jerks to each other. And so these all kind of compound into like what's going wrong. Do we have a toxic community? Nobody wants to stay here. And then it just kind of leveled out. For a long time there in the early part of the decade, I was saying, we don't know what the optimal number of Wikipedia editors is. Like, ideally, there would be more because there's more work to be done. But there's a floor at some point, which there's going to be stable interest, and perhaps we did find it. And then now more editors. There are more editors currently than before. And the best I can say is that there's a whole new generation of students coming out of right now in high school and college who grew up with Wikipedia and who are like it's there's still a very small number of them, but it's just part of their lives. And so we are seeing like a second wave perhaps of Wikipedia editors who are really, like I say, a lot of them are getting started as soon as high school. There you go.
Yeah, so it kind of supports that kind of attrition theory that like once the main bulk of Wikipedia articles were written, we just didn't need as many editors because most of the grunt work was done, and now it was just mainly about maintenance and then adding the occasional new ones. That's interesting. You mentioned that it's kind of like a broy culture. For years, there were lots of stories written about, about how the Wikimedia Foundation has given a lot of lip service to shrinking the gender gap among Wikipedia editors. Has it made any progress on that front?
The short answer is we do not know because the follow-up research has not been done. In like 2009, 2010, the Wikimedia Foundation did sponsor this site-wide, editor and I think reader survey. Because Wikipedia does not collect any demographic information about its readers, it had to go out and actually, collect that information, and I think that was a tall task. And so what they did find there was about 1 in 10, gosh, maybe it was at one point it was even 1 in 12 editors are women. Since then, they've poured a lot of effort into various initiatives, standalone organizations, repeat events to invite women and like women's groups to get involved in trying to learn how to edit. They call these edit-a-thons. It's based on the concept of a hackathon, but an edit-a-thon, you get together and, get some coffee and some cookies and, pitch in and start working on Wikipedia pages. I actually went to one such event hosted by a friend of mine at the Smithsonian's Air and Space Museum a few months ago, where it was a day dedicated to like creating and improving articles on women who had worked in the air and space industry over the last, 50, 70 years that's existed. And I created an article about a woman named Hap Brannicky, who was a rocket scientist, I think, with NASA. It was a few months ago I did this. So there's like a lot of these efforts where they're trying to kind of generate some interest around editing. And the truth is we just don't know how successful they have been, but I have to think that the chance they have had zero impact is also zero. We just don't know how much it's improved by. It really might not be that much. I mean, the surveys also find that men read Wikipedia more. I want to be very careful here. It's easy to slip into, gendered stereotypes, but I do think that men tend to be drawn to, solo pursuits where they're not really engaging with people on a human level, but instead they're, nerding out with their toys, like baseball card collectors, like train spotters, like stamp collectors. Wikipedia editors are fact collectors, and it's very amenable to being a solo activity until, of course, sometimes you bump into other people. And women, again, at the risk of being at the risk of getting canceled, women, I think, tend to, look to organizations where there's more like open, deep collaboration and face to face, and feelings are more important and making friendships. Wikipedia, no one's here to make friends. It's not quite true either. It's complicated, right? No one really knows the answer to these things. That's why we do tend to fall back on these, kind of stereotypical patterns. The limit, because men read Wikipedia more, there's possible that there's just a limit on what women's participation possibly can be. I don't think anybody ever thinks it needs to be 50-50. There is recognition that there are just these big picture trends, but it should be better than it is. No one knows what the right number should be. I think maybe we're all a little afraid to do the research because we may find that we haven't come as far as we'd all hoped.
Well, it's interesting what you say about them like hosting what are so it's kind of the equivalent of almost hackathons where they get together and put in like stubs for famous females, and then I'm guessing once a stub is there, then it's more likely that knowledgeable people will stumble across the article and start adding to it. That the biggest hurdle is just creating the article to begin with.
It's a major one. It's a really good point. Since I created that article for Hap Brannicky, about half dozen editors have been along and added more things around the edges that I didn't think to. And at first I'm like, oh shoot, I should have known to do that. But then second, like, no, this is great. This is the point. Is I do a little bit, someone else does a little bit. It's really quite a miracle that it works at all. And for all the criticism that Wikipedia gets, and plenty of it is deserved, none of it should obscure the fact that it is quite incredible that this community exists, that this project has thrived, And there's this old kind of self-congratulatory thing that Wikipedia editors would tell each other in the early years, and that is that Wikipedia doesn't work in theory, only in practice. And there are moments where you see someone add on to what you did, and you kind of feel it.
So this next thing I want to talk about is something that you're particularly knowledgeable on. Like the beginning of the last decade was when you first started to see these stories of brands constantly stepping on rakes, getting caught editing their own Wikipedia things, and also people with conflicts of interest. And then it's pretty regular thing. We see these stories pop up. Are brands getting a little bit more savvy about editing their own Wikipedia articles? Like, how much do you think like the corporate world has? We talked about the education world. How much is the corporate world and famous people and all that kind of stuff? How savvy are they now about the approaching Wikipedia?
Well, I think on the whole, they did get more savvy more around the middle of the last decade. Oh, sorry, yeah, middle of the last decade, 2014, 2015. There were a couple of major events where those who were inclined to think about it kind of like figured things out. That said, like I talked to the chairman of a major international public affairs company just a few weeks ago, and he was like astonished to learn that anybody was actually doing the kind of work that we do on Wikipedia. I was like, obviously I'm not going to say who it was or the context of it, but I was like a little floored considering that I don't know if we'd worked with this company in the past, but people in his orbit we had. So you can generalize about what people know, but there's always going to be exceptions about who's getting in, who's doing the right thing on Wikipedia, who's doing the wrong thing, and who's doing nothing. And those who do wrong, some of them are actual bad actors who know that they are manipulating Wikipedia toward their own ends. Others still in this day and age do not realize that there is a whole set of rules of engagement. If you are the subject of a Wikipedia article, how do you approach it? Not everybody intuitively realizes they need to go look up the fact that there are rules of engagement. There are still to this day people who do not know that Wikipedia is a volunteer edited, global community. And what can you do? I think of the what is it the adoption of technology chart that you have your early adopters, you have your late adopters, and you have your further down the road you have like your curmudgeons who just don't want anything to do with technology. There's not that many of them, but there's enough that there's no way that anybody's ever going to completely figure out Wikipedia from the brand or the corporate side. So all that I can do is kind of really having conversations like this, trying to educate people that there is a right way to do it. I wish it was more streamlined. Wikipedia itself has had like dozens of different pages trying to explain to outsiders if you're the subject of an entry, here's what you do instead of directly editing. And we'll never get the word out to everyone.
Yeah, but it seems like I wonder if the media creates like a feedback loop to where every time someone does make a mistake and it gets widely reported, and in some ways that's educating other people about how Wikipedia works and at least somewhat educates the public in that way.
Yes, but we still do this, rigmarole every couple of years. I would say it's become less frequent. There is this. I've written a chapter for a book that will be coming out from MIT Press later this year, and mine was about the history of paid editing on Wikipedia, and I divided it up into 4 eras. There's the prehistoric era in the first 5 years of Wikipedia's existence, where there was a little bit of like vanity editing here and there, creating a page about yourself or your friend or your brand, but that was mostly just editors on the project. Wikipedia had not yet hit critical mass. It had not yet become such an attractive place to be. It hadn't become a focal point of SEO and reputation management efforts. But once Wikipedia became ubiquitous, then it did, and moved into a couple of periods of acrimony and strife as the community began to learn that there were, companies and institutions, from the CIA to the Vatican to Coca-Cola and Scientology. Someone from Work Computers was editing Wikipedia on those pages, at potentially at any time. And then, there's later periods where folks like myself who work in this area tried to kind of reach out to the PR world and let them know, hey, you're really not supposed to make direct edits to articles. Certainly are definitely not supposed to do it anonymously. We created this open letter in 2014. It was signed by 8 of the top 10 global PR firms. Again, to my incredulity that this other guy hadn't heard of it before, saying, hey, as an industry, we have not always got Wikipedia right. However, it is our intention to educate ourselves, our clients, our colleagues, and follow Wikipedia's rules. And I do believe that effort helped a lot in terms of changing the conversation around, if you're a brand, how should you approach Wikipedia? But like I say, we haven't reached everybody, so my work continues.
Talk to me a little bit about Jimmy Wales, who is the co-founder of Wikipedia, and what he's been up to. Like, he's probably the most successful internet person who also doesn't happen to be a billionaire, but it's not
Right.
it's not for lack of trying. So, like, he's been like launching various kind of wiki-related businesses over the years, but he's also somewhat still a spokesman for Wikipedia. What's his role been over the last 10 years?
Yeah, no, I definitely want to give him like a bit of a positive shout out on the the not monetizing Wikipedia front, because originally Wikipedia was like a little unprofitable subsidiary of an internet company he was running at the beginning of the 2000s called Bomus, kind of a cheesecake softcore website. A thing for which he, is endlessly ribbed. That he kind of started his internet career in like less savory corners. But like, he saw that Wikipedia was, something special that was not going to be easily monetized, and so he did spin it off to a nonprofit foundation within the first couple of years of creating it. And had he ever tried to put advertisements on it, that community would have vanished, and we wouldn't have Wikipedia today, probably. So credit to him for recognizing what he had when he had it. But as you say, he did not monetize it in the way that certainly the way as Zuckerberg monetized to Facebook. Again, not that Wales could. If he reached for he definitely could have killed the golden goose, and he didn't. Since then, he's been trying to figure out, like any other person, really, whether you created Wikipedia or not, you're trying to make your way in the world, and he always was an entrepreneur. He's had a string of companies since then. The most successful of them probably is Wikia. If you've ever been to Wikipedia or whatever the Star Trek wiki is called, all these pop culture wikis, from High School Musical to like the Shield or Breaking Bad, they have these wikis. Those are all hosted by Wikia, and quite cleverly, the name is Wikipedia, but without the ped, without the learning, right? It's brilliant because it is all the things that Wikipedia does not want to have. Like, Wikipedia wants to have some articles about The Sopranos, but it doesn't have an article about every single character who showed up for one episode. Wikia will do that. So that was a good insight he had. It wasn't a world beater. I mean,
talk about how successful that is. Like, I haven't read anything about Wikia. I land on its articles sometimes when I'm like Googling some obscure character in a TV show to find out who played them or something like that. Right. Does it have its own kind of like editor user base, like very fervent like user base? Like, how successful is
well at this point I am now relying upon the Wikipedia article to answer your questions. Apparently they've rebranded as Fandom recently, which is actually pretty smart. It's Alexa puts it as the number 26 website in the US, so that's not bad, right? It's actually quite good by almost any stretch. Wales is the founder, but he's not in charge of it anymore. And so too is his relationship with Wikipedia. Jimmy Wales has a permanent seat on the board of directors. But he is only one among multiple other directors, and so he remains the most familiar personality like by far associated with Wikipedia. He's not the only co-founder. There's another guy who has sort of a disputed status about, who was in charge of this or that. Most people don't care, but it continues to be a topic of amusement at Wikipedia.
But going back to Jimmy Wales, like he's had a lot of failures, right? Like he tried to create like his own search engine. He tried to create like a news organization. I think he's launched something new recently. What are some of those things?
Okay, sure. So I've said enough nice things about him. Now I can catalog his failures. I mean, so Wikia actually, I think it started out as something he was going to call Wikia Search. He wanted to be an alternative search engine. Obviously, you can tell how that turned out. He then, what was his next thing? At one point he had, what do they call it, an MVNO, one of those, kind of like over-the-top cell phone service companies called the People's Operator. It was available in the UK, where Jimmy Wales lives now. That, I believe, wound down its operations in the parlance of our times. Then he turned his attentions to trying to create another wiki-based website around the news. You have alluded to it. It was called Wiki Tribune. And I actually saw him tease the concept at a speech in Hong Kong back in 2013, I think it was, at the annual Wikipedia conference. And it was intriguing. Like, he was like, we'll have the wikis like change the news. And actually, there already was a news project around the Wikimedia Foundation called Wiki News. And Wiki News is just like, it's dead as a doornail. It is a completely failed project that lots of editors would like to see closed because anybody does look at it, it does not make Wikipedia look great. Wiki Tribune was frankly even less successful than that. He had some investors, he had some money, he had some staff. They were trying to cover global news without any particular identifiable perspective. They didn't really have beats. It was dismal. It was. I wrote a blog post arguing, that it should take more of a local approach, and it could have some success if it did try to go niche like that, and build out in a more, kind of organic way, the way that Wikipedia had. But then they try to centralize it. It's everything Jimmy Wales has done that has tried to be centralized has not really succeeded. Things that he has distributed, where community has taken over. Frankly, there's one that is wildly more successful than anything else, obviously Wikipedia. But, he recently pivoted Wiki Tribune to be a new news-focused social network called WT.social, Wiki Tribune Social, basically. And, it's got over 400,000 users, and it just launched, a couple of months ago. So it's not bad for growth. The website's kind of clunky. The way to use it is a little bit. I don't see what is greatly different about it from Reddit, to be totally honest. But I have not really spent a great deal of time there, and I doubt that I will. A news-focused website that is trying to do away with, fake news is, that's laudable. But I don't think that they have necessarily solved anything. There's no mechanism about it that I understand that will keep it impervious to, false, scurrilous, overhyped, sensationalistic, news and quasi-news. Maybe the fact that it's a smaller community will help it. Who knows? Maybe they will develop a perspective that is unique to that community, and the more people join, the more they buy into it. I hope that's the case. That would be wonderful. I don't know that this is the right platform. They have the tech for it, but I certainly cannot criticize them for trying.
Yeah, and every time a high-profile person launches a new social network, there's always that rush of press, and then users creating an account and trying it out, which creates a new kind of round of press about it got X number of users, but a lot of those people will try it out once or twice and then never come back to it. It's actually really hard to turn something into like a daily habit, basically.
Didn't Justin Timberlake buy into MySpace at one point?
Yeah. Well, Jeremy Renner launched his own app, which everybody, when it finally closed, everybody, then you got like a million headlines that were like, who knew that Jeremy Renner had his own app, which was funny in and of itself. So what are some of the biggest battles going on, now looking towards 2020 and the next decade? What are some of the biggest battles going on within the Wikipedia community?
Battles, huh? That's
like the controversies that haven't been settled about how they should be approaching and what they should be doing, the entire philosophical underpinnings of the community itself.
Well, some of these are going to get into the weeds real fast, so I'll try to touch upon them lightly so as not to bore people with inside baseball, personality conflicts, because these things crop up all the time. There are certain editors who are known as problems, or there are for those who are interested to learn more wiki drama, you can go to a place called Administrators Notice Board /incidents, and this is where people will lodge complaints against editors, lodge complaints against other editors. You can go check it out. Every year there's a couple high profile things. But in the big picture, I would say there is this fundamental tension between the Wikimedia Foundation, the nonprofit that oversees Wikipedia, and all the other projects. There's about 100, there's over 100 employees, and some of them are some of them come out of the Wikipedia community. Many do not. A lot of them tend to be more NGO, nonprofit type people or tech people. And there can be a bit of a culture split. And sometimes they will have initiatives that do not align well with the interests of the community. Sometimes that can be like a redesign of the website or the interface that people use to edit. There was a row a few years ago about creating a visual editor, where the longtime editors wanted no part of it, and the foundation's like, no, we want more people to edit. We need to make it easier to edit, and they went back and forth fighting about it for a while,
like creating like a CMS, basically,
right.
That's like almost as easy to edit as like Wikipedia or Medium or something like that.
Yeah, or like a Word file. That's usually the point of comparison. There's that. There's always drama around the leadership of the foundation. The executive director, the CEO of Wikimedia, is a woman named Catherine Marr, who's been in that role for about 3 years, has largely done a good job, I think, by most people's account. She's seen more. She's a great spokesman for the organization. I've heard whispers that she's a little more hands off around the office, and some of her her number twos are not always the best managers. Again, that's kind of inside baseball stuff that I hear from my friends around Wikipedia that your listeners just don't care about. I think the big picture is they do have good leadership. They have been the fundraising at the organization has been just phenomenal. You see those banners maybe a couple times a year. Wikipedia
begging for $3. It's Jimmy Wales' face or something, but it turns out they have a shit ton of money.
They haven't used his face for a couple of years, I think. But nonetheless, right? Everybody remembers the staring contest with Jimmy Wales every time they'd open up Wikipedia. And I haven't looked at the numbers too recently, but I'm pretty sure they have over $100 million banked at this point. Yeah, so there's a lot of goodwill. Everybody who uses Wikipedia feels at least some pull to give money, and a lot of people do, even though it's really a small number. But it's enough. It's enough. And I think here's the problem: is that money, what it can be used for, is entirely divorced from the day-to-day work that actually goes into building Wikipedia, because the foundation is not allowed to put any money toward paying editors to write articles. They have to stay out of content. They can try to create new editors indirectly by hosting editathons, by creating chapters in other countries. I think Thailand is perhaps the newest, and they are going to be hosting Wikimania in Bangkok later this summer. So the foundation itself it's this global NGO that is trying to bring information and technological literacy to the developing world. Meanwhile, the editor base is mostly middle-aged white men from the U.S. and Western Europe, and I think the volunteer editor base is maybe a little bit red state, and the foundation is definitely blue state. My wife was asking me what is the ideological background or underpinning of Wikipedia, and I think you could describe the founding as libertarian. In fact, it so happens that Jimmy Wales and Larry Sanger, the co-founders, they met on this is a true story, they met on an Ayn Rand message board. And just the ideas of information should be free. We'll use the internet to revolutionize everything. Pretty libertarian. But then the the editing, I don't think I really think that the editor base is conservative, but it's more so than the professionalized group around it, which is definitely blue state territory. Um, and I think that I think that it manages to work with all these, like Wikipedia. Everybody's got to agree on what's in the pages. One of the brilliant insights that Wikipedia had was we're going to have only one article about Israel. We're going to have only one article about fluoride, things that are rightly or wrongly, perpetually debated. And it's like if you go to a page like like the Troubles, or like the Gdansk / Danzig, the city that has gone back and forth between Poland and Germany. Sometimes you have these edit wars or debates that can go on for literally years. The Gdansk Danzig one, which most listeners may never have heard of, actually was the longest running edit war on Wikipedia, figuring out what this company, what this city should be called. And I mean, I say I do think it's the genius because it forces people to focus. It actually, you can't just like take your ball and I'm going to go write the page about Danzig. Oh, I'm going to take the page and write about Gdansk. Nope, you got to come to agreement on a set of facts. And in this world right now we live in, where filter bubbles make it all too easy for us to just like follow only the people who agree with us, Wikipedia really does require its contributors to come together and agree on a set of facts. And the process by which they get there, I think, can teach us a lot about how to approach any of these particular controversies. They just can be very instructive.
Okay, Bill. Well, those were all the questions I had for you. Where can people find you online?
Awesome. Well, I'm on Twitter at William Beutler, although I find that without having to make a resolution to tweet less, I just have been tweeting less. Nevertheless, you can find me there. Come find my company, Beutler Inc., at beutlerinc.com. We're also at Beutler Inc. on Twitter. And I'll give one final plug for both the Wikipedian.net. It is my blog about Wikipedia issues that I write, maybe twice a year these days if I'm feeling up to it. And I'll give one final plug for WikiWatch, wikiwatch.net. This is our software tool to help brands and agencies and organizations track reputations of companies and brands and people on Wikipedia, so they are never blindsided when someone calls up and says, "Have you seen what's on your Wikipedia page?" That'll never happen again if you sign up for WikiWatch. And Simon, thanks so much for having me on.
Awesome. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for joining us. I'm actually on the lookout for new guests for this podcast, so if you do interesting stuff in digital content, whether you're a full-time YouTuber, a media executive, or run a cool niche newsletter, definitely reach out. My email address is simonowens@gmail.com. Okay, see you next week.